Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojó ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ashen Forge. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. How are you guys doing?
Doing all right.
We missed last week, but we're back this week. That was partially my fault. It snowed a whole lot here, and some other stuff was going on, and couldn't make it. But that just means we have more to talk about tonight. So quite a bit to catch up on. I think the three main topics: the guild post, the class post, and then the tank video. I think are the kind of biggest things that came out. They haven't done their next show, right? Is that next week when they're going to do the next dev stream? So
I think was it the
I think that's right.
26th?
Yeah, 26th.
Yeah. So
right.
that'll be cool.
Sorry, I'm reading chat, and it says "can hear you," so I don't know if that means they can hear me or can't.
Right.
Good question.
It's unusual to get a message that they can hear me. At least I don't think
Yes.
I mess up that much. Maybe I do.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Oh,
You guys,
a little low for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna fix this. You all. So where do you want to start?
Well, I have one thing to start with, and I think maybe Neuro was around. No, Neuro was not around for this, because Neuro was on the Golden Feather a few days ago. So one of the first things I want to say is that everybody should know that I'm Braver of Worlds, and so I'm in the preview for what is it called, the pre-alpha or alpha 1 preview, whatever it is that's this weekend. And yesterday we had Steven talking to us in voice chat for a little bit. And the only thing I want to say about that is that it's very interesting to me always to hear gamers make requests versus the mentality of what happens, what changes once you become part of production or development team. And I think Neuro may have experienced this to some degree, but it's really interesting to start off as a gamer and then get into production and go, oh, I thought I would love to be able to do this, but nope. Can't actually do it. And I think Steven went through some of that too in the beginning. It's just interesting to watch that progression.
It's a combination of, like, sometimes the idea of something is better than the reality of it, and some amount of the thing being a much more cumbersome task than you thought for what the payoff is, or that even if you did put it in, it's not actually going to do the thing that you thought it was going to set out and do, and various other permutations of that. So I completely agree. And that is something, though, over the past year or so, I've seen like a really huge difference in his outlook, that even in the past 2 years, that, you know, the initial optimism and, you know, the idealism that he had coming into it back when it was, you know, first kind of making the rounds. I feel like he's definitely talking a lot more like somebody who's, you know, been in it for a little bit now and knows a lot more about the ins and outs and everything. And fortunately, he's got very experienced people helping to mentor him and get him through this. Like, you know, Jeff Bard, for example, is just an absolute legend in the industry. He's worked on a whole hell of a lot. So definitely a good person to be kind of catching up and getting his back on that. And likewise, on the communication side, Maggie's been doing a really good job with that. And it comes up all the time about wanting to see more articles and, you know, wanting to see the new website. And, you know, they know it. They've heard it. So it's It's good stuff. I like the progress that I've been seeing, just like the corporate culture sort of progress over the course of this.
The other news that he dropped yesterday, it's more personal news, but I'm old, so it was a strange, impactful thing for me. His husband John's birthday, I think, was yesterday or Friday, and he just turned 30. Um, and for me, that's still a baby. Like my godchild is 33, so anybody younger than 33 is a baby. Is a baby to me, and you guys are just enough older that you guys just feel like guys. And Steven is just enough older than my godchild that he seems like just a guy, but 30 just seems like that's my baby. That's a baby still. So he kind of
A lot of youth
tossed it
left.
out there, and for me, it was like, oh, what's going on? But that's kind of cool. That's cool. They had a good celebration, I hear.
Well, okay, so where do you want to start with? There's a wall of text for guilds. So anyone that doesn't follow our Discord, Neuro recaps almost everything that comes out in our Discord.
Dev discussions.
Yeah, so it's a great place if you don't want to read through page after page of stuff for information. So that's, I think, a good place to start, I guess, because there's a lot of stuff going on there.
I think it is, but maybe we should start. Well, if we want to include the tank video, we might want to do that first.
In chronological order, since that is what came out first. Anything to say about it? Looks good.
It seems like somebody who's going to take a lot of damage, deal enough damage, but be able to use their aggro abilities, their threat generation to keep the attention on them. I believe they have talked about how it's not just going to be a PvE thing, but your ability to use threat management stuff in PvP situations to like force everybody to look at you for a period of time, for example. So I think it's going to be real interesting to see how the tank plays out, that it's not just going to be the big chunk of, metal clad meat that we hope the boss is bashing on while everyone else is doing just enough damage to not make the boss turn towards them. That was actually kind of an interesting discussion on the Golden Feather, kind of talking about what we were kind of thinking and expecting to see from how a tank plays out and how all the threat management stuff is going to play out. I guess the other thing for me is looking at it from the other side, using the tank as your secondary archetype. Does that immediately get out of all of the only person that's going to generate aggro is the tank, because now there's clearly other people that can potentially augment their abilities with, threat generation. So I'm kind of interested to see how that all plays out. And I could see it being a very worthwhile thing if you're a summoner and you can put out a big beefy creature and you use the tank as your secondary. So your big beefy creature can be the thing that's getting all the attention. That makes perfect sense to me.
Well, and just in terms of the class itself, I'm more interested to see how the various permutations of tank as a primary archetype play out. Someone was saying that they don't want to see like a dwarf or maybe an elf be a tank. They're kind of tired of those kinds of things. But
all based on your attributes.
Yeah, and based on how you do your secondary archetypes, an elf should be a good evasion tank, maybe. Or maybe even a dwarf if it's due to size, if it's harder to hit. So there should be different ways, and you should be able to take advantage with stats and secondary archetype to make a tank play better. a rogue, a tank rogue should make a very good evasion tank. And that's what I'm really curious to see, is how those permutations are. In terms of the video itself, one of the critiques that I saw on the forums was that in the video it seems like the tank was too stationary, I guess, and that the animations of the abilities were locking the tank. But I think we couldn't really tell that from the video. The video was being kind of stationary just so that you could see the abilities well. I don't think it was the animations locking that character in place so much as they just weren't moving the tank around so much so that you could actually focus on what the abilities are. I don't know what your impressions were.
It was kind of hard to tell what the actual dynamics of combat in the field are going to look like from that video. I agree. I feel like there is going to be some amount of movement and getting around that's going to be important, but likewise, being able to pull enemies to you seems like it's equally important as a tank. I feel like part of it's actually not just the threat generation, but like shifting and moving where people are at to be in more ideal places. Like, it's not just that you want everybody attacking you, for example, but you want them all clustered up attacking you, so that way all the AoE can come through and blow everyone away.
Yeah, well, that pull is one of the primary abilities of the tank. So,
Which I'm curious how all of this will work with that sort of action combat, and some of the either pulling in or some of the other. I think there was one, I don't remember the name, it knocked him to the ground. Like if that changes the hitbox position, and not even just casters, but people in melee range. I'm curious how that will all come in. I think y'all are right. It's hard to gauge what any of that is going to really be like when you have a stationary set of targets, not a lot of movement. The only other thing I had that sort of came out of that video is I just really, all the particle effects, I just hope that there's some way to tone them down to a degree. I would actually imagine
there will be settings for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine hardcore PvP players would also probably, I'm not a, PvPer, but I would imagine you would want to play with less particle effects. One, just for being able to see what's going on, but two, for some lag issues as well. So
that question has been asked.
That was something they talked about when they did the last big combat previews. Yes, we know the explosions are way too big and, screen covering, and we're definitely pulling back. What you're saying is not final. And they're probably still in that phase. They've probably tuned it a bit, but it takes a bit of getting used to and really like seeing how they all blend together in a space before you can really get the right sort of feel and focus. I remember going back to the early days of Warframe, and my brother watched me play it for a moment. It's like, I don't even care that it's third person. There's way too much crap going on. It's just too bright and flashy. I couldn't really play this. And over time, they got a whole lot better about it. It's so much nicer now. There are a couple weapons you can spam around that are going to block people's vision, but they're limited. And the people who use them know that they're jerks. But other than that, that was definitely a good example for me of a game that started with like the overwhelming, over the top amount of special effects use, and then over the iterations, tamped it down, made it tighter, made it cleaner, made it blend better with everything. Their entire lighting system has gotten overhauls multiple times. And so there's, I'm sure, a lot more to be done with that. Just changing how the lighting system works, for example, could make the effects a lot more or less present, or, a lot more or less obscuring to gameplay.
it is interesting you commenting on the warrior, the tank having different variations, because Diggs and I were talking about that with the cleric as well, the healer, and I guess it didn't dawn on me that there were 15, and that's just counting a cleric or as a either primary or secondary. And Diggs, you had mentioned
secondary doesn't matter. Yeah.
well, but if it adds some sort of healing to component, but you also mentioned historically the bard has been able to heal in most games. Historically, the ranger has had some sort of healing ability in most games. So it's going to be really interesting. I always come back to how much variation is actually going to be present within each of these groupings. Is there really going to be enough difference when you're playing them that they feel different? I hope so, and I imagine that would be very hard to do with 64 different combinations to make them feel.
Again, it's not really 64. So their primary archetypes, there's 8 because they are literally primary archetypes. So that's the focus. It's really going to be, those 8, and then there are kind of variations of those 8. But it's really the 8 that are going to be the big difference, and then the variations of them are not. I mean, they're somewhat significant, but they aren't really game changing. You're not going to want a rogue cleric to try to be your primary healer, because that's not their primary role. The rogue cleric will be able to do some form of healing, might be only healing themselves, or might be able to heal a couple of other people. But
let's just grab off the name, though. A shadow disciple is what the rogue cleric class is called. And that definitely sounds more to me like somebody who's kind of using magic to augment their sneakiness rather than somebody that's like getting behind the lines in a heated battle to be able to get some heals on their buddy or something. And so I'm wondering, what sorts of augments are going to really enhance the rogue, and to what extent? What are the features of the rogue that are being enhanced by the cleric, I guess?
Yeah, and that depends on which augments you choose as well. So
yeah,
that's really what we have to know. And I'm trying to think about. I can't remember if we have. I don't think we have secondary archetypes for the alpha. So, there are these key concepts that we really that are supposed to be game changing, right? That's nodes, which we don't have a lot of experience with, and how these archetypes are going to work, especially with the secondary, how augments are going to work. And we only have half of the classes really even for the primary archetypes. So there's just tons of information. For it being 4 years in development, it's still a whole lot of information that we really don't know. And so far, it doesn't seem particularly different from any other MMORPG that might have come before.
A lot of it is messaging, right? And we've had these sorts of discussions with them about things, but primarily I think with Cash Shop and people who are not, have not been following for a very long time and not realizing things are skins. They don't actually add any sort of gameplay value. But when you read them, you wouldn't really know that if you didn't pay very close attention. I sort of relate that to, when you read, you talk about nodes, yeah, but then also everywhere you look, the messaging is 64 classes. You're right, Diggs, that there's probably not going to feel 64 distinct whatever, but when you Google, when you read their stuff, what they put out there, 64, we have 64 different names. I think you're right. It's probably going to come down more so. I hope it's not this simple, but in my mind, I think of like World of Warcraft and adding sort of, inscriptions that you can sort of modify certain parts of your spells or your abilities. It almost feels kind of like that's going to basically be what this sort of secondary class selection is. So it's not necessarily something new, but just sort of changing the terminology or the how it's done, basically.
Yeah, it's sort of, and I don't even remember what it's called in WoW. I just go ahead and do it. But what is it called when you take your different paths in each class? I think of it as a subclass in my head and don't know what it's
You're
called.
talking about the different trees?
Yeah. because like I play a feral druid on my druids, and I'm playing a disciplined priest on my priest, who's almost becoming my main in Shadowlands. But it's along those degree. You know, I could do feral or what? I don't even know what the others. Feral and yeah, I don't even remember because I only play one type of each. But it's those subclasses basically. So if I'm using class, this is not Ashes of Creation terminology. But if I'm using D&D, it would be there's 8 classes and 64 subclasses if I'm using D&D terminology.
So, what do we want to move on to next? I don't want to get into the whole subclass debate.
Class, yeah.
Yes.
Well, but so
we've done that before.
Yes.
So yeah, so I think we covered tank. Anything else that I don't think any of us are planning to play tanks. I think that's one of the things with the tank video.
I wouldn't necessarily rule it out, but I kind of have to play the game to know what I want to play.
Gotcha.
It could very well be that being one of the rare tanks that's actually good gets me at the top of every raid list and gets me all the DKPs. So it pays to be a good tank.
Well, then that does lead us into a nice segue into guild recruitment and retention. I think when you're talking about raids and how you might get to the top of a raid list. So, do you have the specifics of the dev question?
Yes. So the original question that they ask us here is,
I can learn to understand you.
I'll just read we're kicking off a brand new series called Guild Gatherings. Guild Gatherings topics are the reverse Q&A, similar to dev discussions. And it sounds like this is going to be a series, so recruitment and retention is just going to be the first one here.
Well, how have you guys joined guilds before?
That's what I was going to get into, but let's go ahead and read the official thing.
The question, Guild Gathering number 1, recruitment and retention. What guild tools are most helpful to you for recruitment and retention, both in game and outside of the game? And then the next topic is going to be about guild halls.
Yeah. So that is, I think I did not even answer this question because I don't particularly care much about guild recruitment or retention. The way typically I will not join a guild because guilds have so many rules and I'm chaotic good. I'm not into order and rules, and I don't want people dictating when I'm going to play or how often I want to play or how I'm supposed to play or what my gear score is supposed to be or any of that stuff. So if I see a list of rules, I'm not joining. The guilds that I have joined were, and I think this was around the time of Landmark. Well, I think I did one first guild I joined was for Neverwinter Online. And I joined that guild because I was following a Twitch streamer who would stream at the same time every afternoon. And once NWO came out, he was like, hey, who wants to join my guild? And everybody who was a follower of that Twitch account joined the same guild. And that was awesome because we were joining because we liked to see him play and we wanted to play with him. And we were familiar with each other somewhat from chat. And that was awesome. And then kind of the same thing with Landmark. I think there was a Twitch follower in the beginning that I was watching leading up to Landmark, and I was like, hey, I like hanging out in their chat. I like hanging out with them when they're discussing Landmark. I'll join their guild. And then lately for us, in the past 5 years or so, It's been we're gonna hang out with DLP crew, or we're gonna be hanging out with Theory Forge crew, and we're following each other from game to game to game, and it's just we like hanging out with each other. We've got a bunch of people. We might as well form a guild.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of different ways that I got into a lot of different guilds back in the Diablo days. Back in the early Diablo days, I'm talking about the first one. I believe the first guild was one that my brother had joined, and then I joined and was there for a while. My brother stopped playing it. I kept playing. I became the leader of that guild, and then due to some, I want to say drama, or maybe I was just bored of them, made my own guild. Guilds in Diablo 1 didn't really mean anything whatsoever. There wasn't even a formalized guild system, and everybody was cheating anyway, so like, what did it even matter who you were playing with? One of our buddies from, gosh, now I'm trying to remember the order of games here, because there was a buddy that we had from one game. Maybe it was that we met him in Ultima Online, or we met him in a game before Ultima Online, kind of hung out with him. Didn't really mess with guilds in Ultima Online either. Didn't form one, didn't join one. I kind of stayed a little bit guildless a little bit for a bit there, and then Planet Side 1, I jumped Star Wars Galaxies. I had jumped in with a crew who seemed like some decent folks, but I didn't go to live. It was just, they were playing in the same spaces as me, and it's like, hey, I want to join. You want to have me? Great. But didn't play it to live. That was all the way back in beta. So after that, let's see, Planet Side 1, I had joined because they gave every Windows user a free copy and a free month. And so I got in, and within a week, I guess I stood out well enough as a player and somebody who was competent that the Raging Primates brought me in. And I was basically hanging out with the Raging Primates for the next little while. I ended up with a different guild in WoW. It was a small elite Planet Side crew who then moved on to WoW, and I kind of stayed with them. Still kept good relations with Raging Primates. Planet Side 2 came around, still Raging Primates. Kind of in between there, though, there was a game called Combat Arms that I came across, and the Pistol Gods was the natural place for me because I loved pistol-only modes so much. And I was really good at it too. When I built this machine here in 2013, like years after I'd stopped playing, I popped in the game, logged in, got my normal 4-pistol extended clip set up, and I was starting to get kicked out of games left and right, just like the old days, because what the hell, this guy just came out of nowhere. He's like double, triple headshotting people. Well, yeah, dum-dums, you don't stand in a line for me to double, triple headshot you. Come on. It's like you don't even know how to play pistols only. So Pistol Gods was my crew for a while, and I've still got a couple of friends from them. And then, yeah.
It occurs to me that your icon is a Raging Primate.
It is. That's right. The purple gorilla logo, that definitely came from Raging Primates.
Okay.
I should have worn my.
I didn't know. I never asked. Now I know. Learned something new every day.
Yeah, purple gorilla. So there was that, and then since Planet Side 2, what the heck else have I played that I really stuck with? I think since then it's mostly been like hanging out with Theory Forge folks and Landmark folks, and I don't think I actually joined a guild in Landmark, but I was certainly like known to everybody as the Castles and Crap Shacks guy and the live feature rank guy. So I was a celebrity wherever I went in that game, regardless. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of fun. But then, with looking forward to Revival, looking forward to COE, all the stuff that we've been covering, I've mostly been hanging out with, us folks here, the Theory Forge crew, and whoever joins us with stuff, the DOP crew, and, whatever they've got going on pretty regularly. And every now and then, if I want to play Planet Side 2, Raging Primates are still there.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of a lot of it was either finding a group and rolling along with them from game to game, or sometimes just not even bothering with guilds, just enjoying the game for what it is and not worrying about those sort of structures.
Mhm. Now, also one of the things that comes up a lot of times, and I think you mentioned it in your notes, is VoIP. How are we going to communicate with each other? And again, uh, once I started even thinking about guilds, it was often uh, we're doing Twitch chat, communicating there. If we form a guild, then actually we were probably using some other type, something like Skype or Facebook Messenger or something else. So we would be in our own local voice chat and not really paying attention to what other people are chatting in the world. Um, I'm almost never paying attention to text chat. And I'm wondering what we were doing in Landmark. I don't know if it was Twitch. It might have been Twitch somehow. I think it was pre-Discord for some reason.
We did a lot with Skype. I remember all the people I had on talk shows, all the people that I kind of played with and regularly
Oh,
interfaced
that's
with.
right. It was
It was
Skype. That's
mostly
right.
Skype.
Yeah, because even Theory Forge was Skype prior
Mm-hmm.
to Discord. Yeah. And so, yeah, I, I because I think even with Landmark, people were talking about, what kind of tools we could have to for guilds and things like that. And I was like, I mean, I don't know that I'd be using in-game tools for that. I'd probably be in Skype, and now I'd probably be in Discord. Um, and I don't know what that's going to mean in terms of communicating with other people in the game
It's
outside of.
going to be an interesting thing because people are going to want to coordinate and talk as a guild, so they are going to use their own out of game platform. But there is very much an emphasis on being able to VoIP talk with other players in proximity in game. So with that, it is very much, I would imagine, expected that you're going to have to jockey between Discord for your guild chat and in-game for like actually communicating with players that you're playing with, guildies or otherwise. So it's gonna be a bit to jockey.
Some of the
I
most
think it'll be fine.
Some of the most interesting parts to this discussion for me are the sort of wanting to connect out of the game. Traditionally I've not been. I got into EverQuest through my uncle, so of course there was communication outside of the game, but only with him. I never connected. Of course, I guess that's way back in 1999, so you don't really have many ways to communicate. But so there wasn't a lot of external communication. The only time that's really come about for me, which was the largest guild or the longest I've been in, was in World of Warcraft, which I just happened to, again, be in game. There was either an OC or a shout for a raid member in Zul'Gurub, and I joined them, and it went well, and I liked them, and ended up, we went from guild. A core of us stayed in that guild for a long time, broke off, joined another guild, and so on and so forth. Probably 4 or 5 or 6 of those folks I did kind of connect with outside of game through Facebook and that sort of stuff. But I've never otherwise. When I leave the game, to me it's an escape from the reality or the external world, right? So bringing that outside. But I can see the arguments for people who are sort of hardcore PvP players who want some of these tools. Makes sense, I guess, but it's not something that I necessarily care about in terms of recruitment outside of the game.
Right, and yeah, and because I'm a cat, so I have two kind of different spectrums of categorizations for players. So I have hardcore and casual challenge, and hardcore and casual time. And I'm a casual challenge player and a hardcore time player. But because I'm all about casual challenge and being casual in general and chaotic, I like it when groups just fall together and we like hanging out with each other, so we continue to hang out with each other. And that's what ended up happening with Landmark. Landmark went away. We like hanging out with each other, so we continue to hang out with each other. We came across Snipe Hunter and Ombwa, and we like hanging out with them, so we hang out with them too and play games with them. And it doesn't matter what game they might be working on or what mmorpg we might be following. We like hanging out and being involved with games and gaming with each other, so we move from game to game to game to game. And there's no rules involved in it. Just if you want to hang out, come hang out. That's my preference. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. And so I'm trying to figure out what kind of tools, and I don't think it's recruitment tools, because it's like Twitch and YouTube are kind of the best in for what we do. But then what other kinds of tools? Like, because I saw some people talking about wanting to track statistics like kill counts, wanting to track gear scores, so that you can display that and think about that when you're one of the tools is how to even invite people. And I'll tell you my pet peeve about any type of party invitation or guild invitation is when somebody I don't know just sends me a whisper, and there's been no RP, there's been no other form of
Hey, now at least they whispered you. They didn't just send you an invite.
But I want to have interacted with the person already, character to character, not player to player. And so if some player is out of the blue whispering me, again, that's going to throw me out of my immersion. Now, if we have both been fighting the same mob or something like that, and we had some kind of interaction while doing it, then I'd be like, oh, let's have a conversation. And oh, okay, that becomes part of that character's conversation. But just to out of the blue from somewhere I don't know magically send me an invitation and I've never heard from you before, and you haven't even bought me a cup of coffee, I mean, I'm probably not going to go with you.
There was a really cool feature, and I don't know if they were the first ones, probably not the first ones to do it. Devilian had a thing where if you engaged and interacted with somebody, partied with them, talked to them otherwise, there was a little feature you could click on their profile and click like a little heart indicating that you had an interaction with that person. Every day you could do this again and again. So somebody who you constantly interact with and have good interactions with, you can keep stacking those hearts up. And so it's like, okay, look through my list. Oh, that dude over there, they've got like 27 hearts and now they're sending me an invitation. Okay, clearly we've like played together. I obviously know their name. We went in and clicked in their profile this many times. I kind of like that, but I kind of want it to be something that's automated, that you don't have to go and manually click, but it just automatically tracks who has actually interacted with each other. But also to the nature of it, have like a heart if it's just like talking, or like a little word bubble if it's that you either fought with or fought against each other. It's like a cross swords little logo. If you did trade with each other, some sort of transaction, like a little, the scales sort of logo. And so it would be those as ways, and potentially other things, to kind of go back through. And when you come to somebody and they give you an invite, you don't necessarily recognize the name, but then you look through and it's like, wait, I got 20 word bubbles, 15 cross swords, and 6 scales. Like, this is a person I know to some extent. But of course, that's all things that players can disregard if they want, and just like, either I know you, I know you. If I don't, I don't. I don't need in-game metrics to tell me that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm hoping happens with Ashes of Creation is that we're going to be building our own communities and kind of naturally forming relationships with the people in our nodes, because we know where they live, we know where our neighbors are. It's not just an instanced apartment. We can literally travel to their plot of land. It seems likely we will start becoming familiar with the same people, the same neighbors that are on at the same time that we are typically. And then we're going to have to progress the node together, and more importantly, defend the node together. Um, I'm expecting we're going to have some common interests crop up. Speaking of crops, some of those might be farming interests. And so, even though a lot of what I saw in terms of what people want to say in terms of kill counts and gear scores, it all seemed to be combat related. And I think I'd be more interested in knowing personally, I'm an explorer, so people who are interested in exploring, I would love to explore with other people. That would be cool.
So like
But I would
a
expect
guild distance over time, like a graph to see how many miles each day that the collective guild members have gone. Something like that would be interesting to you.
just that people are interested in exploring, and especially I have an issue because I'm an explorer first. Like when I go to a dungeon, the primary thing I want to do is explore every nook and cranny of the dungeon, and I don't really care about the kills. Whereas that's unusual in an mmorpg. Most people care about the kills and don't care about the exploring if there aren't going to be any kills or loot in that section. Um, and often people like to speed run through and skip anything that doesn't quickly lead to kills or loot. Um, so there's a kind of clash of temperament there. So I'd love to know that other people are explorers, but it could be crafting. I might want to be more interested in joining a guild that's focused on farming. That could be a thing. I'm thinking I might be more interested, since I'm typically a rogue type. I might be interested in joining a literal thieves guild, or a guild that is focused on, that social organization. And I am very interested in the various religious opportunities and building a religion, what that might entail. So I could see me being interested in joining um, a guild that has that focus. So there's a lot of other information I think I would want to know if I were being recruited, even um, uh, outside of Twitch or Discord. Uh, what other focuses does this guild have? Especially if it's going to be smaller guilds, because I think, we think of these mega guilds, but I think these mega guilds are going to have subsets, and even the subsets might cause conflict. So
It was made very clear that the optimal guild size is 50, because you don't have to compromise on your ability to get the highest quality augments and passives and stuff like that. And that if you expand all the way up to the max 150, part of the process of doing that is that you prevent yourselves from actually being able to get those higher quality bonuses in exchange for having more people under the same roof. So it's a bit of a trade-off. I think what's going to end up happening is that more of the hardcores are going to have their static 50s, but as it was also talked about, use the alliance system heavily. So that way you've got like the top 10 guilds of 50 people in an alliance together. And that's going to be more of the main battle force, for example, that you want to be sending out to, big events and things like that.
but my curiosity there is, who gets to control the castle
The guild that
in that alliance?
That is a
it's
good
limited to
question.
it's limited to 50. Who gets to have control of that castle for, how
I
do you rotate that?
don't think they've answered that, actually.
Right. I'm just wondering.
That'll be a
Um,
question we have to ask on the Q&A.
Well, that's just a negotiation thing. I think from a systems, um, it doesn't matter. I think it's going to play out the way it wants to play out. I'm just saying in terms of maintaining these alliances, that the way people talk now, it's like, oh yeah, we'll be happy-go-lucky, but I don't know. I think sometimes you might want to own the castle. You might want to be the king. Like, how are we going to determine? How are we going to determine that? So that'll be interesting to see. Yeah, Phantom. I'm guessing you don't. So you only joined one guild? Is that what you said?
No, I've been in several, but
Uh-huh.
the
Just one
two
that was long-term.
longest, one was EQ, the other was WoW. But the two things, there's a lot of good stuff to go over actually, and ideas that come out of that post. The two that I wanted to mention, one is this, everyone always looks at it as the guild evaluating its potential members and sort of what tools, for recruitment and retention, but why not flip that question around for the players and evaluating the guilds? If you're going to look over all of my kills and my guild gear scores, well, what is going to be visible as a tool for me to look at your guild? Are you going to, that's, I hope they have that approach as well.
I think for some amount of EP status, that I believe that is something Steven has talked about, is that he likes being able to have people display that we are the top this or the top that. And so there's competition between rivals that want to, take that seat for themselves and be recognized for it.
Yeah, but I guess in my mind, what I'm referring more so is that if they're wanting players' individual sort of metadata to be available to them as a guild to evaluate someone, then the actual data of the guild should also be publicly visible to everyone who is not a part of that guild, so that you can adequately.
I guess that was the other half of what I was saying, is that if it is set up in that sort of way, I would hope that the guild flaunting its numbers and its kills and its, member accomplishments and how long it's been around and all that activity and stuff, that it is something that would be out there and available for potential recruits. Because you're right. I mean, it's definitely, it should be a both ways sort of thing. Like, guilds should be out there trying to recruit people that they find to be, really good and really effective, and, trying to retain and promote those people. Meanwhile, the players themselves are going to want to find a guild that's going to treat them right, that's going to accommodate their time, accommodate their desires in the game, what they're trying to do, whether or not they're trying to stay in one node or not, for example. And this is all the sort of stuff that we've seen in the Q&A about what sorts of information, are able to be accessed from both sides to see, guilds seeing what a member's about or a potential member's about, and likewise a player seeing what a potential guild is all about. So hopefully, if they are going to have that amount of data, it's not just going to be, looking at the individual, but also being able to look at the, the group as a whole, and potentially even being able to like compare groups side by side. If I get 5 invites, for example, if I can just like bring each guild page up and compare all of them, that might be something helpful for me, for example.
The other thing that I would like to see, for I guess a couple of different reasons, which I can't believe I'm saying, but so when EverQuest 2 first came out, that was EverQuest 2, World of Warcraft, 3 largest, 3 most long-term MMOs for me, and actually I was in EverQuest 2 before I went to World of Warcraft, and would have stuck out EverQuest 2, but everyone left for World of Warcraft, and so that caused two things. All my friends left, so I joined them in two. Sony changed EverQuest 2 to try to compete with World of Warcraft. But anyways, one of the things that they had on the vanilla side when they first released that I thought was, at the time, kind of a pain in the ass, but sort of makes sense now, was this idea that your guilds, and this kind of comes to the recruit or the retaining part. So as your guild leveled up as a group by doing different writs and everything, other things through EverQuest 2. Equally, you could de-level. So if you became sort of inactive or didn't do certain tasks, at a steady pace, you will start to lose experience, and your guild will de-level. And with that, all of the perks that have come with that and the power that comes with that. That is something I hope and I would like to see put in place here. For retaining one for the world change, that's a big part of it, is just trying to not let some super top guild, you had an internal fight and half your guild left, but you took the next month to recruit people and you're still have the top guild status. I would like to see the ability for some sort of internal strife to happen, and this is the retainment part, where if you aren't good to your guild members, as they should be good to you, but you aren't good to them as a leader, that you actually start suffering as a guild, and another guild has the ability to sort of take up that place as well. That's something that, at least for EverQuest 2, absolutely drove me nuts, but I actually think would make sense in this sort of living world setting where I would think the last thing you want is something that is very easily persistent, regardless of sort of what's going on with the internal components of a guild. So,
imagine there's actually a very built-in system that will accommodate that. If the node that your guild hall is built in gets knocked down, that's a big setback. That's a huge setback. And that's something that other players can actively facilitate. They can go after you. So if you're the top guild and you're in this one place that doesn't have a lot of friendly neighbors, the sights are on you, the targets are on you there. And it might not be that you lost progress and stopped playing so much as everybody else decided to beat you up, and through territory loss and attrition, and potentially losing members as a result. Yeah, I could definitely see those benefits starting to slip in like a long drawn out campaign.
Geolis Danner has had a lot of interesting, very intriguing suggestions and comments in chat, and I feel bad that we haven't paid more attention to mentioning them on cam, but he just wrote, or they just wrote, I think a guild attached to a node should de-level if the node is destroyed, goes back to level 1 encampment. And I think I would need to see more details on both of these concepts.
It makes sense. It makes sense. You weren't strong enough to protect your node, so you should no longer be the top guild in the region.
Well, I don't know what is meant by top guild. I don't know how that. So not only am I casual, but I'm non-competitive. So I don't.
Well, part of that is we don't know necessarily what all of the rewards will be, so you can't really. But when I think of the mayor of the whoever's leading the metropolis, it would probably be associated with a guild, and if you are no longer able to protect your metropolis, then your guild should no longer be a top level.
But it's not going to be.
And I'm not saying that your guild level will be tied to that, but.
Yeah, guild isn't really tied to whether or not you are the leader of a metropolis. You are going to probably need that leader or whatever to be around and active in order to maintain their leadership of the metropolis. So that's going to happen in any case, regardless of guild. It's also going to happen in any case with relation to castles, which is more guild related, because any guild that's not around to compete for the castle is not going to have the castle for that month. But I'm thinking in terms of not reputation or top guild, but just rising through the levels of the guild itself. I mean, I mean, I guess it does make sense if you've been gone for a year and nobody's been doing anything with that guild. When you come back, you probably aren't going to have any resources attached to that guild. That's just life. And some of the ways I'm thinking of it is like if I think of a guild that is going to be focused on religions, and religions are going to be trying to establish their reputation in an area. Yeah, what happens to your guild perks if you have not been going around and maintaining those churches or whatever, those temples? So I think there's might be some merit to it, but I'd need to see the specifics of it, because I think some of that happens naturally anyway, just because you aren't around to maintain stuff. So that stuff is not going to be maintained in terms of if you're building a social organization, if you have a structure for that and you're not around and somebody destroys it or whatever, it's just not there. I don't know if that has much to do with your perks and abilities, or maybe your abilities but not perks. I don't know. I have to again think of the specifics.
And even with all of that, there's the productive capacity. If you are low on resources, if you've lost territory, etc., that could be another thing. And depending on how much you're a crafting focused guild, that could be, you know, everything to you. You just lost all your blueprints and materials, your high tier materials. Like, that's devastating. That's a lot to have to build back up from.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of my point, is that like you could theoretically bank blueprints. So just because you haven't been active doesn't mean that you lose all the blueprints that you had acquired for 5 years.
Right.
You might come back in a year and be like, I'm bringing my blueprints out of mothballs and I'm ready to go. So it just kind of depends on the details.
That just assumes that the place that you've got them stored didn't get kicked over at some point.
Of course. I'm just using a very basic example.
Yeah.
Ways that it would not inherently be lost is kind of what I'm saying. So.
Right. Though, if it's an exclusive recipe and it hasn't been used in over a month, I could very well see them adding a quest where a rogue crew has to go in and perform a heist and steal it. Just like the So Long Sanctus series, where we got the clarification that, no, you aren't just stealing items off other people willy-nilly. This gem was a specific quest item, so the ability for a rogue to steal it off of somebody in the midst of combat was a special feature associated with this special quest item that they still haven't figured out what to do with. Mm-hmm. So I could see something like that with a blueprint, that if you've got an exclusive one-of-a-kind blueprint and you're not using it, there will be quests given to others to infiltrate and take that from you.
What is DKP, Phantom?
Dragon kill points.
I don't even know what those are.
That was the internally managed currency system, and I want to say EQ 1 and 2 is where it got popular. It was used in WoW as well. It's basically participate in a raid, you get certain amount of DKP. When it comes time to pick loot off of a boss and who's going to get it, you would expend your DKP in one way or another to be the one who gets it. Some groups, it would be your DKP builds up, and the moment you spend it, it's all spent at once and it's gone. Other ones would allow you to accumulate it and only spend as much as it took to buy it out from the next highest bidder. And then with that, I recognized it was unfortunate that I kind of created that sort of power vacuum in the guild I was in WoW, because I was in every raid. I was on every day. I was constantly playing that game. So I had so many points I could outbid anybody on everything. And yeah, sure, I loved it being like the badass Tauren Shaman engineer that was unstoppable on the battlefield. But I recognize it was probably a bit to the detriment of the rest of the crew, who maybe could have used that one item or that other item themselves, and we got a lot more out of it instead. So, you know, it's got its things. DKP, and then of course there's that hilarious 50 DKP minus video from back in the day.
I absolutely hated that system. You join a new guild, somebody that's already been raiding for 6 months, and then you gotta raid for 6 months before you have enough points to actually bid on anything, even though you're actively participating. It drives me nuts.
That's why
a lot of these questions and these answers, the things that are on the forums, are interesting, but ultimately probably will not apply to me because these are not guilds I'm going to be actively seeking out anyways.
Right.
Which will be interesting to see.
And yeah, and that brings me kind of back around to what I was saying at the beginning of the topic. Is it part of what fascinates me about this is, it just seems like tools that again, based off the way we have formed our groups, these are things that we don't need. I don't know why you would even need this. You mentioned something in chat about lending out guild assets, which is what the Twitch guilds that I joined did, because we're playing because we like each other and we like hanging out with each other. And somebody needs something and we don't need it, which is go ahead, take it. Like that's we don't care.
You've got a specific expedition that you need the boat for, so they give you the keys to the boat.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't need the rules because we just had everybody's welfare in mind, and those are the things that I prefer. So yeah, it does seem interesting to me to just think about needing recruitment tools, because the groups that we're a part of don't really need recruitment.
That was what one of the people actually said, is, you know what? Don't focus on the actual recruitment tools. Just make sure people can join guilds, stay in guilds, get kicked from guilds. Other than that, if it works, it works. Just let people figure out their own recruitment systems and stuff. They'll figure it out.
But they're going to, they're going to, though. We all know Steven. I think every time we talk PvP, and this literally every time, I in my head, as you guys are talking, I'm replaying the video of Steven leading his guild and the speeches that he would give in leading his guilds to battle and victory, which are very fun to watch. If anyone's not, I forget where that was even at, YouTube or something, but he's very good at it. But he's going to invest on guilds and features of guilds, because that's what he's what he loves to do.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yep.
Yeah. The only other thing that I've been kind of typing in chat. The one thing that I would not like. There was a recommendation or something about I think it was an alt detector or some sort of way to, I guess, know what your members' alts are. That would drive me. That's just a no. I know he's not going to. I know he won't do that, because I think the comment from him was something more on the personal intrigue and the spy crafting and all of these sorts of things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want that, because most often I have alts just to get away from people. So if you don't know who my alt is, that's because I don't want you to know who my alt is.
Right. Yeah. I think it's interesting to have the AI detector to be able to tell who's, a multi-box of somebody else, but that, I would imagine, is something that they're just going to say out in the open. It's like, hey guys, so I'm a fighter, cleric, multi-boxer. I bash stuff and I heal myself while I bash stuff. That's why you're recruiting me, right? Or,
The other thing I was going to mention is like RP guilds. I'm thinking that if there are guilds who do RP events, like I would want to see that as a list. Like what kind of events have you done lately? I think that would be a cool thing. And even in terms of making alliances, maybe I don't want to join the guild, but maybe if I find the guild page, it'd be like, oh, like I want to go hang out over there and either participate or help them put an event on or something like that.
You said something that brought up a very good sort of thought for me, is the idea that you don't have to join a guild, but you could be an individual member joining an alliance. And I could see that being a really good system for guilds who have like a trusted group of people they work with, but often need to swap people out or short on people, or summer's coming up and people are going to be on vacation. The numbers are going to be a bit off, that sort of stuff happening. So you have your non-gilded alliance members who you're able to access and work with. And obviously there's going to be a vector of spycraft going on with that too. You don't know what sort of, spying and shenanigans they're actually up to, but by and large, if the person's, being an active contributor to the alliance, then, why kick them out? Why not have some place for them? And you're right about events. That was actually something that came up a lot. People talking about doing monthly or every 2 weeks having to do like a guild feast, and people join in, they talk, they RP, maybe they get a bonus for attending the feast. Having competitions, your own in-guild tournament, inter-guild tournaments within an alliance. Just having like friendly challenges to see, which of your fighters in a best of 3 can kind of top the rest of them or whatever.
And it's funny to me that you focus on that because in the events that I attended, we had costume parties.
Yeah, there you go. That's fun too.
Costume contests, or if it was sometimes, you'd win an award for best costume and stuff like that. So if it's a feast, that's the stuff I'd be more interested in than the combat, because
right,
I'd rather do a whole lot of other stuff rather than combat. The guy I'm hanging out with right now, and WoW on a fairly regular basis, we spent yesterday flying, exploring, fishing, and cooking. That's about the only thing we did for a couple hours. It was fun, and that's the kind of fun I'd like to have with the guild, not necessarily focused on combat. So
You will start the first fishing guild.
Yep, or farming guild. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are past our time, so this hour went really fast. So really didn't even get. We were going to talk a little bit about crafting as well. Didn't really even get into classes, but that just means next week we will have plenty of more to talk about. So, Diggs fishing tournament. Yeah. Yeah,
dude, that just makes me want to be able to build like a platform out at sea that you're using as like a water sort of city node or whatever, and it's like, yeah, come to the old fishing platform and get your hooks in.
Well, make a flotilla. There you go.
I'm just imagining Diggs arguing the rules for people as they come up and try to win, but
there would be no rules. I don't even know what winning would be.
And there we go. That was my point. All right. We will be back next week. Thank you all for joining. Have a good week. And we'll see you next Sunday, same time, same place. See ya.
See you then, everybody.